Welcome, I'm Rabbi Phil Bressler of Beit Am in Corvallis, Oregon, and this is the daily summary video for the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Yomi Daily Halakha Learning Project, covering the passage from Siman 94 Seif 3 to Siman 94 Seif 8. You can find links to the Hebrew and English text of this passage and to the calendar of upcoming passages in this video's description. We're continuing today to talk about Eruvei Chatzerot, combining of courtyards to permit carrying within them on Shabbat. And these are some more conditions and some more diagrams to illustrate conditions that would necessitate making an Eruv Chatzerot. So if you have inner and outer courtyards, and here I've made a customized diagram not found in the printed edition of the Kitzur that shows you what we're talking about here. Say you have two courtyards, an outer courtyard that exits to the streets, and what the Kitzur is going to call an inner courtyard that can only reach the street by passing through that outer courtyard. The two courtyards can make either separate Eruvin for themselves or one joint Eruv. Now the joint Eruv allows carrying all over within that combined complex. And of course the separate Eruvin would allow each courtyard to carry within its own area. If, however, one makes and one doesn't, things get a little complicated. If the inner courtyard makes an Eruv, but the outer one doesn't, the inner courtyard can carry within their courtyard and the outer one can't. That makes sense. But if the outer courtyard makes an Eruv and the inner one doesn't, then it turns out no one can actually carry. And the Eruv that the outer courtyard makes is of no use because the folks who live in that inner courtyard, those inner tenants, have a right of passage through the outer courtyard out to the street. Therefore, the outer courtyard is still, at least to a degree, theirs. And so not everyone who needs to be bought into the making of the Eruv has been bought in. The same rules apply if the inner courtyard is actually physically above the outer courtyard, like on a second floor. As long as they have pass-through privileges from the top floor through the bottom floor and out to the street, they can nullify the outer, or in this case, lower courtyard's Eruv. And it's basically also the same as above, even if we're dealing with only individual apartments that are nested one within the other, with different occupants, or with one apartment that's split into two rooms. Okay, finally, here's how you make an Eruv Chatzerot. What you do is one of the tenants of the courtyard takes a loaf of their own bread, and bread here is symbolic of dwelling in a particular place. And another tenant comes over to their apartment, takes hold of that loaf, and by lifting it up, acquires it on behalf of not only themselves, but also on behalf of all the other Jewish tenants of that courtyard. The owner of the loaf makes a bracha, makes a blessing, and a declaration that carrying is now going to be permitted on Shabbat. And since everyone owns now a share of that loaf, it stays where it is in the apartment of the person making the Eruv, but everyone else now has the privilege of accessing their property there, and therefore everyone has the privilege of moving between apartments and the already shared courtyard space between them. The other tenant who acquires it on everyone's behalf should be a non-relative if possible, ideally someone with a separate financial interest. The minimum amount of bread required to pull this off, if there are fewer than 18 tenants involved, is about a third of an egg per tenant's worth of bread, so really not actually a very large loaf at all. If there are more than 18 tenants, there's a cap on the maximum size, which is enough food for 2 meals. And really, that comes out to a loaf that's about 6 to 8 eggs in size. Note this loaf stays where it is through Shabbat, so I think you don't want to make it unnecessarily large because it more or less gets wasted by sitting out through Shabbat. That's all for today. As always, our learning is dedicated to Rabbi Shlomo Gansfried, the author of the Kitzur, and the historic Jewish community of Uzhhorod, Ukraine. See you tomorrow.